Okay, let me start the session. So in today's session, we'll focus on how to create an application by using SAP Fiori worklist template. Creating an application using SAP Fiori worklist template. So first of all, we need to understand the data flow. Data flow from backend system to the front-end app via OData service. So first we'll try to understand the data flow, then we'll try to create an application using SAP Fiori worklist template. Need to follow this diagram. Whenever you fetch data from backend system, for example, there may be some tables, table 1, 2, 3, etc. There can be collection of tables. And each table can have some collection of records. So this is how it looks like. Now, what we need to do is we need to make use of SAP NetWeaver Gateway. We make use of SAP NetWeaver Gateway component. By using that, we are going to develop an OData service here. Of course, today we are going to use one existing service. At later point of time, we are going to create OData service also from scratch level. But as of now, I can say there should be an OData service, and inside OData service, there will be two important options. One is entity type, another is entity set. So entity type is technically used to maintain collection of fields at OData level. And entity set is to hold collection of records at runtime. So what we can have is we can have multiple entity types, we can have multiple entity sets. We can have collection of entity types, we can have collection of entity sets. All those things are possible at OData service level. Okay, let me give some basic idea of at OData service level, we make use of two important options. One is an entity type, another is entity set. So the main purpose of entity type at OData service level, it is to maintain collection of fields. And each field with data type as well as length. Every field contains data type as well as length. Entity type contains collection of fields, and each field contains data type and length. And what about entity set? Entity set is to hold collection of records. It is to hold collection of records at runtime when service is executed. And not only that, at OData service level, we implement database functionality. So what we can do is at OData service level, we can have multiple entity types, multiple entity sets. For example, this is entity set 1. So there can be multiple entity sets like this. It is possible. But every entity set ultimately contains collection of records at runtime when the service is executed. So in our case, we are going to use one entity type as user. We are going to use entity set as user set. As an example, these are the two options we are going to use in today's session. Entity type as user, entity set as user set. So the data can come from one or many tables to the entity set here. What you can do is we can fetch data from multiple tables, one or many tables, and we can send the data to a single entity set here. We can get data from one or many tables from backend system, and we can put the data into an entity set at OData service level. So when the service is executed, the data will be available under an entity set. So what we can do now is we can develop a front-end application, like it can be UI5 application, or it can be SAP Fiori like application, or it can be a .NET PHP application here. So we can use different front-end applications. Why? Because OData services are independent services here. OData service becomes independent of the front-end application. So what we can do is we can use any front-end here depending upon the client requirement. Mostly we'll go with Fiori application, but other applications also supports OData services. So the data can be collected. The data can be collected from an entity set, and you can put it inside a front-end UI5 app. So in front-end UI5 app, the data can be displayed on a form, or it can be table, it can be chart, etc. Similarly, the data coming from an entity set can be used in a Fiori application here. And the data can be displayed under various formats. It can be a form, list, table, charts, microcharts. And not only that, a third-party applications also can fetch data from entity set from OData service, and they can display in the front-end application here by using different screen elements. So the point here is very simple. Whenever you consume OData service, especially for fetching the data, what you can do is you can bring data from multiple tables into one entity set. And that entity set can send data to any type of front end depending upon the client requirement. So this is a simple basic data flow we try to follow when we fetch the data. How to insert data, how to update data, that we'll discuss later. No need to worry now. So the point here is when OData service is executed, the backend data or backend records will be fetched into an entity set here. The entity set can be used to hold data and display data in the front end. It can be UI5 or Fiori. In general, we use these things. But OData service can be used in other applications as well, .NET PHP applications. So whenever OData service is executed, the backend records will be fetched into an entity set. And the entity set can be used to hold data and display data in the front-end app. So one last time, I'll repeat here. You can use one or many tables. And you can fetch data with the help of a select query here. You can use select query with join or association, something like that. And you can fetch data from multiple tables into an entity set. And entity set can display data in the front end by using different screen elements in different front end applications. So this should be on your fingertips. Okay, let me save this. This is from backend system to front-end app via OData service. So backend data comes to entity set. Entity set can be used to hold data and display data in the front end. So very simple. And please remember, OData services are independent services. Now, so as an example, what we do is we'll try to create an application using a template. So we'll try to create an application using SAP Fiori worklist template. So what is step one? Step one is collect OData service details. If you want to create an application through any template, first what you do is try to take one of the OData service. Either you create service from scratch level or at least you take the existing service. In today's session, we are going to use one of the existing service. So OData service details like OData service name is required and OData fields are required. Generally, OData entity type is required. Which contains fields. And OData entity set is also required. So this is technically step one. If this information is available, you can also practice from your system. But how to create this service from scratch level, we are going to discuss in separate sessions. No need to worry now. So as an example, let me log into that backend system. Here you can see so I'm trying to go to SCGWT code, that is Gateway Service Builder. SAP Gateway Service Builder. Now, I want to take one of the project here. You can see this is an OData service here. Something like 7 AM CRUD OData project. If you take any project, generally it contains entity types and mainly entity sets. There are two options here. Of course, there are other options as well, but today's class will focus on these two options: entity types, and there are entity sets. So here you can see there is an entity type as user, and that internally contains collection of fields. So I want to utilize these fields now. And not only that, you can see there is an entity set that is user set. And inside this service, already select query is implemented. Okay, let me open that. I've written one simple select query. Let me just open that so that we can directly use it in the front end to execute the service. So here you can see there is some method like get entity set. So it's one of the method implemented already inside the service, and this method internally contains a simple select query here. So we're trying to fetch data from so-and-so database table into some entity set here. And if required, we can pass an input. But the point is very simple. In this service, the select query is already implemented. You need not write at this level. So what we are trying to do, we are fetching data from database table into an entity set. And if required, you can pass some filter inputs. Okay, so let me just highlight this. Get entity set method contains select query here. Just for clarity purpose. Now you can see the functionality is already implemented, but what are the fields you want to use it in the front end? What is the entity set you want to use it in the front end, so that you can collect from here? Okay, let me just save this. You can also use the same information for practice purpose as of now. So this is our project name. And these are the OData fields in this case. And the field names are case sensitive when you're accessing from the front end. The name of the entity type is user in this case, which contains all these fields. And the name of the entity set we are going to use, that is user set here. And the name of the service, this is the project name, and you'll get underscore SRV. That becomes the project name. Service name. This is your project name, and you'll get underscore SRV. That becomes the service name. So when you're trying to access this from the front end, this is the name that should be used for accessing the service. So entity type in this case is user, and OData fields in this case. So these are the fields, and these are the case sensitive fields. Please remember, when you are using these things in the front end, the names must be as it is. Every field first letter is uppercase here. You can see that. Every field first letter is uppercase. So whatever is available here, the same fields names as to be used in the front end. So the name of the entity set in this case is user set. Okay, so actually this should be on top. So let me put it here. OData service name. That is Z7AM. CRUD OData project underscore SRV. If there is no SRV, then that is a project name. If you use underscore SRV, that becomes the service name. So in the front end, you should not use OData project name. You should use complete service name. So these are the details that are required to start with a Fiori app development here. You can collect OData service details from SEGW transaction code, SAP NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. So as of now, you can use these details. Okay, so step 2. Now you can open SAP Web ID tool. Our main focus is from step 2. So open Web ID tool. That is, you can start orient.exe file and just minimize that. And open Google Chrome and use below URL. I think you're already aware of this. You can see, I want to open orient.exe file. Just minimize this and try to open Google Chrome. That is recommended in general. And here you can use something like localhost 8080 web id /index.html. You're already aware of this. Then log in with web ID details. Okay, so let me log in. So first time, you'll get something like this. First time you'll get this welcome screen. So what you do is just go to development workspace here. Under workspace, you can right click and create project from template. Even in business application studio, also you'll find the same options, more or less. No need to worry. So you can right click workspace, create new project from template. So you'll get some templates here. Work list template, master detail template, UI5 app template, etc., etc. So what you do is open development workspace. Just right click workspace folder and select new project from template. And here in today's session, we are going to select SAP Fiori worklist template. So you can see this. Today we are selecting this worklist template. Right, so you can click on next and provide project name, for example, Z6:30 AM Fiori project 1, something like this. Okay, so you can just click next, then provide project name. This is a front-end Fiori project name. And here, this is the most important, service catalog. I told you how to configure all these things. So select service catalog. From this, you need to select EH7. FIO is a dummy one. Don't worry about this. Select EH7 and you'll get a login screen for connecting to the backend system from WebID tool. So I've already provided these details as well. Click on sign in. If the login is successful, then you should get list of OData services here. So you can see the list of OData services here. Select service catalog and select system as EH7. So this is a service destination for connecting to SAP backend from SAP WebID tool. Why we have to connect? Because we have to consume the service so that we can fetch data or we can do other database operations. So okay, you got this. Login with SAP backend details. This also I've already provided earlier. Now, according to our description, you can see this is a service I'm trying to consume. Z7AM CRUD OData project SRV. So search for OData service and select that service. Here you can see CRUD OData project. So here you can see that. And you can see all the entity types, all the entity sets are visible. In our case, user set is the entity set and it is internally having some collection of fields here. The fields of entity type is assigned to entity set and the list of fields are visible when you're consuming the service. You can see that. But don't select any field at this point of time, just select the service name. What you do is just select the service name here. Okay, let me take that screenshot. So EH7, it connects to backend, and this is a service we are selecting. And here you can see whether this service is running or not. You can get that status here. What is that OData version? What is the type of that service? Whether the status is running or not, the entire service name and the service details, general details are available here. And if you select something like entity set, the list of fields are also visible here. The data type and the length of each field, they are visible here. If you select an entity set. So that is not important now. Just select the service as of this procedure is concerned and click on next. Now what you can do is you need to provide some title. For example, SAP Fiori app, and namespace. If you use uppercase, it is not going to work. Don't use uppercase for namespace. Namespace is one of the folder. Namespace is like an internal folder structure. So I'm providing some namespace as Oasis here. You can provide X, Y, Z, but it should be lowercase. Namespace must be lowercase. So I'm providing Oasis. You can do X, Y, Z, but must be lowercase. And provide some description. These are the general details. Now, as I told you yesterday, by default, a default table will be created when you create application through worklist template. But the table has to be created by taking data from entity set. So according to our diagram, you can see which entity set you want to use and which fields you want to use it for displaying data in a table in the front end. So that you need to configure. These are the initial configuration settings, but later point of time, the code is auto-generated. That auto-generated code, if you want, you can remove it, or you can add some more fields. You can do whatever we want. But this is the initial configuration settings for creating an application through any template. So I'm selecting an entity set here, for example, user set. And I want to configure some of the fields. For example, first name, salary, country, etc. By default, these fields we are configuring here, but this is not the final output. This is just the initial output. We can change this output to any extent by adding more number of fields, by removing the existing code, or by completely changing that entire screen. Everything we can do it. But initially, when the application is created, it is created by using these details. Okay, let me just save this screenshot here. So what we are trying to do is we are providing title, namespace, description. These are general options, but the most important is the entity set. And this is OData, field 1, field 2, etc. we are trying to provide. So whichever fields you want, you can provide here. And by using these fields, we are trying to maintain technically data binding. So data binding is nothing but configuring backend OData fields in the front-end application. We are trying to establish relationship between backend OData fields and the front-end application. That we are calling it as a data binding here. So it's a relationship between backend OData fields and the front-end screen element. It can be table. It can be table or a list or any screen element, but here we are trying to use table by default. Or you can call it as front-end application directly. That application can have any screen element, table, list, chart, etc. So by using these things, we are trying to establish data binding. So let me save this. Data binding relationship between backend OData fields and front-end application. That application can have a table, list, chart, microchart, etc. It doesn't matter. Now you can click next and then click on finish. If everything goes fine, the project will be created, and that project contains all these default files here. You can see some files and folders are generated here. You can notice that. So according to our template, you can see these are the several files and folders that are auto-generated. Now, if you closely observe, there is object view here. Some piece of code is also available. There is object view.xml, some piece of code is auto-generated. How to write the code from scratch level? We are going to do that. And there is work list view here. And you can see object view contains object controller. And work list view contains work list controller. You can see that. And there is a properties file. And there is formatter.js file. And similarly, there is a component.js file, manifest.json file. You can see that. Manifest.json file. And there are other common files like metadata.xml file. So all these things are required to develop an application. So they are auto-generated at this point of time. And don't forget this one. Okay, let me highlight these options as of now. These are all auto-generated because of that Fiori worklist template. So application is created through worklist template. So you can see object view.xml file. And it is associated with object controller.js file. There is worklist view.xml file. It is associated with worklist controller.js file. And there are other files also like .properties file, metadata.xml file, formatted.js file, and component.js file, then manifest.json file. If you want, you can add some external files, external views, external controllers. We can do all those things at later point of time. We can add n number of views, n number of controllers, n number of other files depending upon the requirement. But these are the basic files that are required to run an application which is created through worklist template. So files and folders are auto-generated for an application which is created using SAP Fiori worklist template. Just remember this simple note. Several files, folders are auto-generated for an app which is created through Fiori worklist template. So in different sessions, we are going to concentrate on different files. Okay. At right time, I'll try to introduce the right file so that we can write the code comfortably without any problem. But as of now, I can say these are the list of files that will be generated. Just remember these things. Okay, let me write one more point here itself. So a view is nothing but a screen. Please remember that, or you can call it as a web page. And each view is technically associated. It's associated with a controller. Just remember this. Files and folders auto-generated for SAP Fiori worklist template. Okay, so now say suppose I want to run this. Okay, let me complete this here. After selecting service, you need to provide some options. Provide something like title. Let me complete this note file. And you can provide something like namespace. Namespace must be lowercase. Then not only that, provide a description for that app. Something like that. And the most important is maintain data binding. So what you need to do is there will be object collection. For that, you need to configure an entity set, in our case, user set. And configure the fields. Okay, let me check what are the options available. Okay, so these are the options. Collection ID, title, numeric attribute. You need not by heart these things. We can ignore it. This is like object title. For that, we are trying to provide just first name, I think. And here, numeric attributes. Attribute. So here we are using salary field because it's a numeric field. And object unit of measure, I think. So as of now, for this, we are just configuring country. So based on these details, internally table will be created. So these fields are nothing but this one, what I have provided here in step 1. You can select some of the fields from this at the time of maintaining data binding here. And the name of the entity set is user set. The same thing I've used here at the time of data binding. This one. Now, you can click next and then finish. So that's a basic procedure for creating an application through a Fiori worklist template here. So automatically some files and folders are generated. They are generated. Just remember that. Now, if you want to test it, say suppose I want to test the initial output. I want to test the initial output of our project here. So what you need to do, just select that project folder and click on run. You can see this. If you want to initially test it without writing any code, what you can do is select your project folder, which we have created just now, and click on run. So that's run option. Okay, so don't expect much as of now because we did not write anything. So you'll get only 2 screens by default. Let me just run that output here. You can see. So it will ask for backend connection details. Now you can see this is your initial screen. This is your first screen. That is nothing but a work list screen here. And by default, it will display table here with collection of records by taking the data from an entity set. So what we can do is we can select a record here. We can select any record. The selected record, you can take it to the next screen. And this second screen is technically, object view here, according to this template. So by default, you'll get 2 screens and each screen is a full screen page here. Each screen is a full screen page. You can see that. So the selected record, you can capture and you can take it to the next screen. By default, it is displaying as of now. But as of now, I can say, if you closely observe this output, so this is because of the first view. This is because of first view, that is work list view here. Just remember this. In work list view, you'll get a search field and you'll get a table by default. Work list view, initial output. Now, on selecting a record, it will display the next screen. So this is nothing but your object view here. Of course, it is a blank screen as of now, but this is because of object view. It's an object view initial output. By default, there are 2 views for this template. So the output looks like this. So you can run this app at any point of time. Here you can see that. Just click on run. It will load that initial screen. On selecting record, it will load the next screen. And there is a back option by default available. Now, this is not the final output. This is just a temporary output and an initial output. We can add whatever we want in this particular screens. So, okay, let me write this here. As of now, you need to test it. So that is step 3. Select your project folder and click on run option. That's it. Now, what you need to understand here is if you want to write any code inside these files, if you want to add any functionality, then first you need to start with XML syntax. So let me highlight that here. Creating, okay, syntax for creating screen elements. Syntax for creating screen elements. For Fiori applications, we have to use XML syntax, very simple syntax. Even a 10th standard candidate also can create screens. Of course, implementation of controllers, those things they cannot do it, but the screen development, even a 10th standard person can easily do it with XML syntax, the most easiest syntax. And this is the syntax we are going to use it in Fiori applications, especially for screen development. So the syntax looks like this. Syntax 1 is for simple screen elements. Syntax 1 is for simple screen elements. Syntax 2 is for complex screen elements. Most important, if you understand these two syntaxes, you can develop any type of screen which you get in real time. Any screen you can just easily develop by just using these two syntaxes. Now for simple screen elements, what we do is we have to use a begin tag. Tag you need to use. Use begin tag, use end tag, like this, that's it. Every screen element contains a class. You have to use the tag here, begin tag and end tag. End tag you need to use with slash here. Now on begin tag, what you can do is you can use property of that class with its value. Every class contains some property, so you can use property equal to value, something like this. And not only that, if you want, you can use event equal to event handler. A class can have event, so you can assign with event handler. Of course, you can have multiple event handlers, multiple events, and you can have multiple properties. So for any simple screen element, just use screen element begin tag, screen element end tag. On screen element begin tag, use property equal to value and event equal to event handler. So that's it. Or you can also use like this. Use like this. And instead of using end tag separately, instead of using end tag separately, you can use directly slash here, slash end tag. So you can use the first approach or second approach in terms of simple screen elements. Both are technically same. Here we are using begin tag, end tag separately, but here we are using begin tag and end tag with slash, that's it. So it's up to you, you can use whichever you want. Especially for simple screen elements here. Simple screen elements means input field, date picker, time picker, slider, checkbox, switch, text field, text area. So those type of screen elements, they're all simple screen elements. Image, link, text, text view, formatted text. There will be simple screen elements. For all those things, we can use this syntax. Now, what about complex screen elements here? So for complex screen elements, what we do is we are going to make use of screen element begin tag. And compulsory, there should be screen element end tag. Screen element begin tag, screen element end tag. You can have an internal screen element. Internal screen element. Begin tag, internal screen element end tag. For complex screen elements, this is the approach we have to follow. Screen element begin tag, screen element end tag, and within that we can have internal screen element begin tag, internal screen element end tag. And on screen element begin tag, if you want, definitely you can use property equal to value syntax. Property equal to value. And event equal to event handler. On internal screen element also, we can use this. On internal screen element also, we can use property equal to value syntax, event equal to event handler syntax. So main screen element can have property with value, event with event handler. Sometimes internal screen element can also have property with value, event with event handler. So these are the two syntaxes that you need to remember. Now the entire screen development, the complete screen development in SAP Fiori is dependent on the above two syntaxes. So if you remember those two syntaxes, then you can develop any type of screen without any problem. So, okay, let me just take this as a simple screenshot. This is one of the syntax, or you can use this syntax. Alternative syntax for syntax 1. And then for complex screen elements, this is the only syntax. So simple screen elements can be like input field, text field, text view, text area, formatted text, checkbox, image, link, etc. Rating indicator, progress indicator, sliders, those are all simple screen elements. But complex screen elements will be like, for example, table, list, drop down, then charts, we are going to use it, micro charts. So these are all complex screen elements. So for complex screen elements, there will be an internal screen element. So then you have to use a second syntax. So at right time, we are going to discuss that. Don't worry, but just let me highlight these things. For creating screen elements in SAP Fiori applications. So in real time also, the same syntax is used. So no need to be panic. And it doesn't matter, the same syntax will be applicable. The above syntaxes are common for all types of tools, whether you use WebID or whether you use Business Application Studio, it doesn't matter. The same syntax is going to work. I have already tested. Okay, now you can see, say suppose, if we go to an object view or a work list view, let me go to object view here. Okay, I'm not writing anything much. So if you closely observe here, by default, a Fiori application contains a default library here. Okay, otherwise let me put it here. Okay. So here, hello students, can you hear me? Can some of you confirm? Can you see my screen? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes,
Yeah, we can hear and see your screen.
Okay, fine. Okay, let me continue. So here you can see, if you take any view, for example, I have taken object view here. And it contains a default library as sap.m. That is what yesterday I was talking about. For any Fiori application, sap.m becomes a default and the base library. Please remember that. Let me just highlight this. It's a base library for base library, or I can say default library, whatever, for all SAP Fiori applications, whether it is a standard application or a custom application, but this remains same. And if you want, you can add other libraries here. Library 1, library 2, etc. You can add other libraries here if needed. We are going to do that in the next session. So if needed, we can add other libraries for utilizing the respective classes. And here you can see in worklist template, every screen is a full screen page here. Every screen is a full screen page here. You can see that. Now inside this full screen page, as a developer, what we need to do is we can write whatever code you want, you can write it here. Any number of lines, you can write it here. So we can place code here for creating screen elements as per requirement. We can place code for creating screen elements as per requirement. So that code should exist here. After full screen page tag, whichever code you want to write, you need to write it here by using XML syntax. So as of now, just remember these basic things. Just overview of a view. It can be object view or any other view, but this remains same. There will be a default library. If you want, you can add other libraries, and there will be a full screen page. And after full screen page, you can add whichever content you want. So that is how we are going to proceed further. Okay, let me just save this. Now, as an example, just let me test it so that you'll get some confidence. So here you can see, I just want to use one input field. Input field with value, for example, 1001. And here I want to use, for example, label, text. Sorry, enter, for example, user ID. And you can provide some width if needed. For example, 200 pixels. So whichever code you want to write, you can write it here. And that will be reflected. My intention is just to show output, whether this is reflected or not. But in the next session, we are going to start our actual coding. You can make it blank, something like this. So whichever code you want to write, you can write it here by using this syntax 1 or syntax 2. But that code should be written here after your full screen page. Then only it will be reflected in your original output. So, okay, let me check whether it is really working or not. Save it and you can run it. I've added that code in second screen. So in second screen, you can see those fields are reflected. Of course, the output is not meaningful, but here the fields are reflected here. The fields are reflected. So whatever code you write, that will be reflected. But the code has to be implemented inside this section here after full screen page. So I'm not writing anything now. Okay, so just let me write a simple note. As a developer, we can implement screen elements related code under a view after a full screen page tag. There is a full screen page tag. After that tag, we need to implement our code. So just remember this. So from the next session, we will start writing the code after this full screen page tag. and everything we are going to run it, test it. After writing different lines, we'll try to test the application in the same manner what we are trying to do now. Now, say suppose if I go to the next screen, for example, work list screen. So work list screen, here you can see work list screen also contains what? The same options here. Work list screen also contains SAP.m as a default base library, and this also contains a full screen page. After full screen page, you can write whichever code you want here. For example, let me just show it, whether it is working or not. Let me try here. In first screen, I'm adding this code. For example, label text. I can take one input field, value, with some width. So just for testing purpose, I'm adding some lines. Okay, last name. Now, we have added these lines after full screen page in first view. So if you want to run, you can run it here. Now you can see in your first screen, now those values are reflected here. Those fields are reflected. This is our first page. On top of that, you can see last name field, first name field, user ID field. So everything is reflected. Something like this. So the point here is very simple. Whatever code you want to write, you try to write that screen elements related code under a view, but after a full screen page. That is the strategy we are going to follow. And not only that, we can create different content areas. Content area 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We can create different sections within that page. But first, we'll try to deal with this. Okay, let me remove this code. This is unwanted now. Let me bring it back to normal. So this is a normal. Just try to test it up to here. And if you have any doubts, you can ask me now. But let me tell you, in the next session onwards, we will implement code for creating a screen with a form, with collection of labels and screen elements. There will be several screen elements. We are going to discuss step by step. So that will be the next session. The practical part will start from tomorrow onwards, especially in terms of coding. In the next session on Monday. Then if you have any doubts, you can ask me now up to here.
Yeah, hi Vijay.
Yeah, what's your doubt, Narayan?